The year is 1590. The month is August. Imagine the heavy, humid air of the American coast pressing down on you. A small English ship moves slowly through the shallow, dangerous waters near Roanoke Island. On board is a man named John White. His heart is beating fast. His eyes are fixed on the shore. For 3 long years, he has dreamed of this exact moment. For 3 years, he has fought to return to this tiny piece of land in the New World. Why? Because his family is there. His daughter, his son-in-law, and his tiny granddaughter, Virginia Dare, who was the very first English child born in the Americas. He left them here in 1587 to get help. Now, finally he is back. The ship drops its anchor. John White and a few sailors step into a smaller wooden boat and row toward the beach. The sun is setting, casting long, dark shadows across the trees. White calls out into the forest. He shouts his daughter's name. Only the sound of the wind through the leaves and the waves hitting the sand. They walk up the beach and approach the settlement. The area is surrounded by a heavy wooden wall, built to protect the people inside. But as White walks through the entrance, his breath stops. There is nobody there. The houses are gone. The small structures have been taken down. There is no fire burning, no sound of children playing, no livestock. The entire place is completely empty. It looks as if the people simply packed up their things and walked away. But where could over 100 people go without leaving a single trace? White searches the area desperately. Then, his eyes catch something on one of the heavy wooden posts at the entrance. Someone has carved letters into the wood. He walks closer, holding up a lantern in the growing darkness. 7 letters are cut deeply into the bark. C-R-O-T-O-A-N. CROATOAN. That is it. No cross, which was the secret signal they agreed to leave if they were in danger. Just a single word left behind in the silent forest. John White stands there, staring at the word, realizing that everyone he loves has completely vanished into the vast, unknown continent. This is the mystery of the lost colony of Roanoke, one of the oldest and most chilling puzzles in American history. Today we are going to look at the clues, step into the shoes of the people who lived it, and try to understand what really happened on that lonely island. To understand the empty town John White found in 1590, we have to go back to the beginning. We have to rewind our clock to the year 1587. At this time, England was a small but growing power in Europe, ruled by Queen Elizabeth I. The English looked across the Atlantic Ocean and saw Spain gaining incredible wealth from the Americas. England wanted a piece of that wealth. They wanted to establish a permanent colony, a base where they could claim land, find gold, and build a new future. A wealthy adventurer named Sir Walter Raleigh financed the expedition, but unlike previous attempts, which only involved soldiers, this group was different. Raleigh wanted to build a real community. He gathered 115 people. These were regular citizens, farmers, shoemakers, tailors, and scientists. Crucially, there were 17 women and 9 children in the group. They were leaving their comfortable lives in England behind to start over in a strange, wild land. John White was chosen to be the governor of this new colony. He was an artist, a man who had visited the American coast before and had painted beautiful, detailed pictures of the native people and the wildlife. He was a man of peace, not a soldier. In May 1587, their 3 ships sailed away from England. After a long, uncomfortable journey across the ocean, they arrived at Roanoke Island, which sits just off the coast of modern-day North Carolina. From the very first moment, things went wrong. The ships were supposed to take the settlers further north, to the Chesapeake Bay area, which had better deep-water harbors. But the ship's captain was an arrogant man who was eager to go hunt Spanish treasure ships. He refused to take the settlers any further. He forced them off the ship at Roanoke Island and basically told them, "This is your home now. Good luck." So, the 115 settlers stood on the beach, watching their ships prepare to leave, realizing they were stuck on a small island. And winter was coming. Roanoke Island was a beautiful place, but it was also a dangerous trap. The soil was not perfect for English crops. The weather could change instantly, bringing fierce storms. But their biggest problem was relationships with the local people. Before this colony arrived, English soldiers had visited the island. Those soldiers had been brutal. They had argued with the local Native American tribes, specifically the Roanoke people, and had even killed one of their chiefs over a minor dispute about a stolen silver cup. When John White and his peaceful settlers arrived, the local tribes did not see families looking for a new home. They saw the return of their enemies. They saw dangerous invaders. Tension grew rapidly. Within just a few weeks, one of the English settlers was attacked and killed while he was out alone catching crabs in the marsh. The settlers were terrified. They realized they were outnumbered, running out of food, and surrounded by people who wanted them gone. Yet, during this dark time, there was a moment of pure hope. On August 18, 1587, John White's daughter gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Virginia Dare. She was a symbol of the colony's future, a sign that life could grow in this difficult new world. But a baby needs food, and the colony had almost none. The settlers realized they could not survive the winter without help from home. They needed tools, seeds, weapons, and more men. The leaders of the colony approached John White. They told him that he was the only one who could go back to England and convince the government to send help. White did not want to go. He was terrified of leaving his daughter and his newborn granddaughter alone in such a dangerous place. But he knew that if he stayed, they would all starve. So, just 9 days after his granddaughter was born, John White said a painful goodbye. He walked down to the shore, stepped onto a ship, and sailed away. Before he left, he gave the settlers a strict instruction. If you have to leave this island, because of danger, carve the name of your destination into a tree or a post. And if you are attacked, carve a cross above the name. White expected to be back in a few months. He thought he would return by the spring of 1588. But history had other plans. When White arrived in England, he found the country in a state of total panic. A massive fleet of Spanish warships, the famous Spanish Armada, was preparing to attack England. Queen Elizabeth ordered that every single English ship, no matter how small, must stay at home to fight the war. White's supply ship was taken by the government. For 3 years, the war kept John White trapped in Europe. Every single day, he must have wondered, are they alive? Did they survive the winter? Is my granddaughter growing up? He could do nothing but wait, and that brings us back to where we started. 1590. The war ends, White finally gets a ship, sails across the sea, steps onto Roanoke Island, and finds nothing but a single word carved into a wooden post. Before we investigate further and look at the clues left behind, let us open the storyteller's notebook and unlock 3 powerful words from this chapter. Improving your vocabulary will help you understand the deeper parts of this mystery as we move forward. Our first word today is vanished. Vanished is a verb, and it means to disappear suddenly and completely, often in a way that is difficult to explain. In our story, over 100 settlers vanished from their village. They did not just move away. They disappeared without a trace. You can use this word in your everyday life when something disappears unexpectedly. For example, I left my keys on the kitchen table this morning, but now they have completely vanished. Our second word is colony. A colony is a noun. It is a country or an area that is controlled by a more powerful country, usually one that is far away. The people who go to live there are called settlers or colonists. Roanoke was England's attempt to create a colony in America. In modern English, we also use this word for groups of animals or insects that live closely together. For example, while walking through the forest, we discovered a massive colony of ants building a nest near the old tree. Our third word is harsh. Harsh is an adjective. It describes conditions that are unpleasantly rough, cruel, or severe. The settlers at Roanoke faced a harsh environment with difficult weather, poor soil, and dangerous conflicts. It was not an easy place to survive. You can use this word to describe weather, rules, or even someone's voice or criticism. For example, the winter in the northern part of the country is incredibly harsh, with heavy snow and freezing temperatures that last for months. Now that we have these tools in our notebook, we are ready to look closer at the crime scene. John White is standing in front of that post, looking at the word CROATOAN. What does it mean? Where did the people go? In the next module, we will begin our investigation into the primary theories. We will explore the dark possibilities of a local war, the chance that the settlers tried to sail home on their own, and the fascinating evidence that they might have chosen to become part of the native world just to stay alive. Stay with me as we continue to investigate the mystery of Roanoke. Imagine standing exactly where John White stood. The sun has completely set now. The shadows of the trees are long, dark fingers reaching across the empty ground. The island is perfectly quiet, but a good detective knows that silence carries its own kind of evidence. When a crime or a mystery occurs, what is missing is often just as important as what is left behind. Let us look closer at the physical evidence. The houses were not burned down. This is a vital clue. If the colony had been attacked by enemies, the buildings would have been destroyed by fire. Smoke would have been seen from miles away. Instead, the structures were carefully dismantled. The heavy wooden beams and the roofs were taken apart by human hands. This tells us that time was available. The settlers were not running for their lives in the middle of the night. A decision was made, a plan was created, and the town was systematically deconstructed. But why? Why would a community take apart their homes if they were planning to return? What did the missing boats mean? All the small boats that belonged to the colony were gone. They had vanished from the shore. They must have been loaded with supplies. The heavy cannons, the iron bars, and the large pieces of equipment were also missing. However, 4 large, chest-like boxes were found buried in the dirt near the fort. They had been hidden by the settlers before they left. When White opened them, he found his own books, his maps, and his paintings. They were completely ruined by water and mice. They had been dug up and searched by someone else before his arrival. Then we must consider the rule of the cross. Remember the agreement made between White and the leaders before he sailed away to England. The settlers were commanded to leave a sign if they were forced to flee. A cross was supposed to be carved above the name of their destination. White looked closely at the word, CROATOAN, on the wooden post. He searched the nearby trees where the letters C-R-O were also discovered. No cross was found anywhere. What can we deduce from this? If the rule was followed, the lack of a cross means they were not in immediate danger. They had not been attacked by local tribes. They had not been forced to run into the woods by a sudden enemy. A conclusion can be drawn that they must have left willingly. They might have been invited to leave by a neighboring group. Or perhaps they simply reached a point of absolute desperation. Think about the timeline. 3 winters had passed since White left. 3 long, freezing winters without any supplies from England. The crops were failing. The local water sources were drying up because of a massive drought. Scientists today have studied the rings inside old trees from that period, and they discovered that the years between 1587 and 1589 and 1589 were the driest years the region had seen in 8 centuries. The settlers could not have survived the winter without help. Food must have run out completely. If you are a parent on a lonely island and your children are crying from hunger, what do? You do not sit and wait to die. You pack up your things, you take down your houses to use the wood, you load your boats, and you move toward survival. The word CROATOAN pointed toward an island south of Roanoke, known today as Hatteras Island. It was the home of the Croatan people, a friendly Native American tribe who had helped the English in the past. It seems so logical. The clues were right there. The destination was written on the wall. So, why didn't John White just sail south and find them? This is where the story becomes truly tragic. White desperately wanted to sail to CROATOAN Island the very next morning. He returned to his ship full of hope, but the wild Atlantic weather had other plans. During the night, a violent storm arrived. The sea became a monster. The anchor cables of the large ship were snapped by the heavy waves. The ship's food and fresh water supplies were lost or damaged. The captain, worried about losing his ship and his own life, refused to stay in the dangerous coastal waters. The vessel was pushed out into the deep ocean by the wind. White was helpless. He was forced to watch Roanoke Island disappear into the storm, knowing his family was just a few miles away. The ship had to sail all the way back to Europe. John White never had the money or the opportunity to return to America again. He died a few years later, an old man with a broken heart, never knowing the fate of his granddaughter. For the next 20 years, the wilderness kept the secret safe. No English ships came to look for the lost colony. Roanoke was abandoned. It wasn't until 1607 that the English tried again. A new group of settlers arrived in Virginia and established a town called Jamestown, about 100 miles north of Roanoke. The leader of Jamestown, Captain John Smith, was determined to find out what had happened to the original colonists. Smith began asking the local leaders about the lost people of Roanoke. He heard dark rumors. One powerful chief named Powhatan claimed that he had personally ordered the slaughter of the Roanoke settlers. He stated that the colonists had been living with a regular native tribe nearby. But Powhatan did not trust them. He claimed his warriors had attacked them, and he even showed Smith an English iron hatchet as proof. However, other stories were told. Some travelers reported seeing European-style houses built with stone, and children with light hair and gray eyes living among different tribes deeper in the mainland. Paid search parties were sent out by the Jamestown leaders into the thick forests, but those searches failed completely. The woods were too dense, the swamps were too deep, and the rivers were too long. Every trail went cold. The people had been swallowed by the continent. Before we continue our journey into the forest of theories, let us take a short pause. Let us look away from the map for a moment and step into our second language anchor, grammar in the shadows. When we investigate a mystery from 400 years ago, we cannot speak with absolute certainty. We do not have video evidence. We do not have living witnesses. Therefore, when we speak, we must use specific language structures to show that we are making logical guesses about the past. In English, we do this by using modal verbs of deduction in the past. The structure is simple. You take a modal verb like must or could, you add the word have, and then you use the past participle, or the third form of the verb. Let us look at our first example from the investigation. They must have left willingly. We use must have when we are almost 100% sure that something happened because the evidence points directly to that conclusion. The houses were taken down carefully. There was no cross carved on the post. Therefore, based on these clues, we can make a strong deduction. They must have left willingly. It is a logical certainty based on the facts we possess. Another everyday example would be, look at the wet grass outside. It must have rained last night. Now, look at our second structure, which we used to show that something was impossible. They could not have survived the winter without food. We use could not have when we are sure that an event was impossible in the past. The drought was severe, the soil was bad, and their supplies were gone. It was physically impossible for them to live there without help. So, we deduce that they could not have survived. In your daily life, you might say, he could not have stolen the money because he was at work with me all day yesterday. Notice how these structures allow us to become historical detectives. We look at a physical clue in the present, like a dismantled house or a missing boat, and we use these modal verbs to build a bridge back to the past. By using must have and could not have, you can discuss theories and debate secrets with precision. So, let us use our new tools. The settlers must have realized that help was not coming from England. They could not have stayed on Roanoke Island forever. They must have walked down to those boats with heavy hearts, carrying whatever they could protect from the rain. The question that remains is this: did they find safety on CROATOAN Island? Or did they walk directly into a trap? In our next module, the investigation deepens. We will analyze the modern DNA evidence, the hidden maps that were discovered only a few years ago, and the final, shocking secrets of the stones that were found in the woods. Keep listening. The answers are waiting in the dark. Welcome back to our final investigation. If you have traveled with me through the first two chapters of this journey, you have stood on the empty beaches of Roanoke Island, and you have analyzed the strange letters carved into that lonely wooden post. Now, it is time to take off our storyteller hats and put on the glasses of an analytical investigative journalist. We have the data, we have the context. Let us examine the three major historical theories that try to explain what happened to the lost settlers of Roanoke. Let us examine theory number 1, the assimilation hypothesis. This theory suggests that the settlers did exactly what they wrote on the wall. They left the island peacefully and integrated, or blended into, the local CROATOAN tribe on Hatteras Island. When we look at the supporting evidence, this hypothesis is incredibly strong. First, it perfectly explains why the houses were taken down carefully instead of burned. The settlers were moving to a new home just 50 miles south, and they needed to transport their tools and materials. Second, it explains the complete absence of the distress signal, the cross. They were not under attack. They were moving in with friends. Furthermore, we have fascinating historical clues from later years. When English explorers finally visited the regional tribes in the 17th and 18th centuries, they found native people who could speak some English, practiced certain European customs, and had gray eyes and light hair. In recent years, researchers working on the Roanoke Vanguard project have used modern science to track the DNA of families in that region. They have discovered genetic markers that match the surnames of the original lost settlers. On the other hand, this theory has a major flaw. If over 100 English citizens lived out their lives on Hatteras Island, why didn't archaeologists find significant 16th century English items mixed into the native trash sites? While some English artifacts have been found, such as a specific gold ring and pieces of iron, we do not have the massive amount of physical evidence you would expect from a community of 115 people living there for decades. Did they assimilate completely, or did they move again? This question leads us directly to theory number 2, the massacre hypothesis. This is the dark, violent explanation that many early historians believed. It suggests that the colony was completely wiped out by hostile forces. The primary evidence for this theory comes from Captain John Smith of the Jamestown colony. As we discussed earlier, Chief Powhatan confessed that his warriors had slaughtered the settlers because they were living with a rival tribe that refused to submit to his empire. From a strategic perspective, this makes perfect sense. Powhatan was actively expanding his territory at that exact time, and he viewed any alliance between native tribes and strange white settlers as a direct threat to his power. There is also the possibility of a Spanish attack. Spain claimed all of North America, and they actively sent military ships up the coast from Florida to destroy illegal English bases. However, when we analyze this theory like detectives, we run into massive problems. The absolute biggest flaw is the physical state of the Roanoke settlement. If Powhatan's warriors or Spanish soldiers had executed a mass slaughter, why were there no bodies found? Why was there no blood, no broken weapons, and no signs of a desperate struggle? Most importantly, an invading army would have burned the village to the ground. They would not have spent days carefully unscrewing doors, removing wooden roof beams, and cleaning up the site. The lack of the carved cross also completely contradicts the idea of a surprise massacre. Let us move on to theory number 3, lost at sea. This hypothesis looks at the missing small boats and suggests that the colonists died while trying to escape the island on the water. The logic behind this theory relies on the severe environment. The settlers were starving, and the historic drought was destroying their chance of survival. They knew John White was supposed to return, but by 1589, they realized that something was delaying him. They could not wait any longer. Therefore, they decided to take their fate into their own hands. They loaded their small boats, including a pinnace, which is a small ocean-going ship left behind by the main fleet. And they tried to sail either north to the Chesapeake Bay or all the way back across the dangerous Atlantic Ocean to England. The evidence supporting this is the fact that all their boats were completely missing from the shore when White returned. They had to leave the island somehow, and the water was their only highway. But the flaws in this theory are as deep as the ocean itself. A pinnace and a few small wooden rowboats were never designed to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Even a trip north to the Chesapeake Bay was incredibly hazardous. Remember the massive storm that hit the coast on the very night John White arrived in 1590. The Outer Banks of North Carolina are known as the graveyard of the Atlantic for a reason. The waters are shallow, the currents are unpredictable, and the hurricanes are vicious. If the settlers had attempted to move their entire community, including small children and elderly people, on those fragile boats during a storm season, they could have been flipped over by a single wave. They would have drowned in minutes, leaving absolutely nothing behind but an empty island and a word carved on a post. So, which theory do you lean toward? Were they adopted by friends, killed by enemies, or swallowed by the sea? Before you make your final decision, let us open our final language segment. The idiom detective. When professional investigators, journalists, and everyday people talk about historical mysteries in English, they use specific idioms and phrasal verbs. Today, we are going to unlock 2 essential expressions that will immediately elevate your fluency. Our first idiom is, to leave no stone unturned. To leave no stone unturned means to look everywhere and try every possible method to find a solution or discover the truth. It comes from an ancient Greek story about a man who buried treasure under a field of stones, and people turned over every single rock to find it. In our story, we can say, historians have left no stone unturned in their search for the Roanoke colony, analyzing everything from old maps to modern DNA. In your daily life, you can use this when you are working hard to solve a problem. For example, I will leave no stone unturned until I find out who deleted the important files from our company computer. Our second idiom is, to vanish into thin air. To vanish into thin air means to disappear completely and suddenly without leaving any explanation or clues behind. It describes something that goes missing so perfectly that it feels almost magical or impossible. For instance, 115 people living on an island seem to vanish into thin air, leaving only a single word behind. You can use this expression when you lose something common, or when someone leaves a place unexpectedly. For example, I was talking to my friend at the crowded party, but when I turned around for a second, he had vanished into thin air. Now, your ears are tuned, your vocabulary is sharp, and your mind is full of historical data. It is time for the active listening challenge. I am going to challenge you with 3 multiple-choice questions based on our journey today. Listen carefully, process the options, and type your answers in the comments section below. Let us see if you can get a perfect score. Question number 1. Why was the lack of a carved cross on the wooden post such an important clue for John White? A. It proved that the settlers had successfully found a massive gold mine. B. It was the secret distress signal, meaning its absence suggested the settlers did not leave under a violent attack. C. It showed that the settlers had forgotten the instructions White gave them before he left. Question number 2. Fill in the blank using the correct grammatical structure for historical deduction. The settlers, facing the worst drought in 8 centuries, so food and water run out completely by 1589. A. Could not have B, must have C, vanished into. Question number 3. If a modern detective says they are going to leave no stone unturned during an investigation, what do they mean? A. They are going to search every possible location and look at every clue thoroughly. B. They are going to stop the investigation because it is difficult. C. They are going to build a new stone monument to remember the victims. Take your time, think about the vocabulary and the grammar structures we analyzed, and write your choices, such as 1B, 2A, 3C in the comments. I will personally check your answers to see how well you mastered this lesson. We have reached the end of our journey today. I want to warmly praise you for your dedication. You have just completed a 45-minute English immersion session. You didn't just study grammar rules from a boring textbook. You used your mind to investigate one of the greatest historical mysteries of the world while naturally absorbing the passive voice, past modals, intermediate vocabulary, and advanced native idioms. That is exactly how real fluency is built. Before you close this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss our next case file. Share your own personal theory about the lost colony in the comments, and try to use at least one new vocabulary word or idiom from our storyteller's notebook today. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep your mind sharp, and remember, the truth is always out there, waiting in the shadows.